Sebastian, warmest welcome to the Genius Leadership Podcast.
Anna, thank you for having me.
It's the first time I'm having someone calling from Dubai. I've had different continents, but this is the first time someone from that part of the world. So thanks for that, adding spreading the geography of our show here.
Well, it's the first time I've been interviewed from Iceland as well, so lots of first times today.
Yeah, Genius Leadership is a lot of first timers for my guests and for me as well. So that's a big part, beautiful part of the journey.
Totally.
Sebastian, tell us about yourself. What do you want us to know and understand about you as the background for the conversation we're about to have about you and your business journey?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Sebastian Bates. I guess you could sum up what I do as I'm an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, adventurer, and a father. I started my first business at the Warrior Academy about 15 years ago, and it's now become the largest martial arts academy in the Middle East. We specialize in character development alongside building this business. I've also built a charity called the Bates Foundation, which is now the largest martial arts academy for underprivileged children on the planet. We teach about 4,000, mostly orphans, children from slum areas, homeless shelters, rescue centers in underprivileged countries. We now run our academies across 6 countries. So we teach about over 6,000 students per week around the world.
That's fantastic. And I'll get into your background, but just the scale of this 6,000 students per week. How many of them are recurring? How long is the journey of those students usually? How long do they stay with you?
On average, 6 to 8 years. So we call it the black belt journey. Most children stay with us 6 to 8 years. It's one of the beautiful things about martial arts is just how it really gives children that direction. Especially with something like Taekwondo. We teach freestyle Taekwondo, and the beautiful thing about that is you've got the belt system. So they've got these very visible and tangible steps which guide them along the journey, which is really great. And one of the reasons I focus on kids as well is because they're far more consistent than adults. Adults tend to come and go, and life comes into play, whereas kids tend to stay in the same place for a long time. And if they love something, they stick to it. And you can really make some amazing developments when a human being sticks at something for long enough. And so I've really enjoyed working with young people over the years. I think, we always say in the Warrior Academy, our legacy is not just what happens in the dojo, it's what our students will go and do when they leave. And so that certainly really inspires us. But yeah, 6 to 8 years tends to be the typical journey. All of our students train at least once a week. Some of them train up to 5 times a week. I think we've got a club in the Himalayas near Everest where the kids train twice a day, sunrise and sunset, which is just amazing. The passion there is unbelievable. I get videos of them running around the mountains at 5 a.m. just as the sun is coming up over the mountains. And it's, if you look at it like that, we're talking probably 15,000 spaces per week rather than individual students. But yeah, 6,000 regular students every single week.
That's fantastic. And it's so amazing that you've built something that actually gets kids on the journey with you for 6 to 8 years, because you can really make such an incredible impact in their lives and the lives of people around them and whom they will touch and lead later on in their journey in their adulthood. So fantastic, and kudos for that.
Thank
So
you.
I would like to go to your journey. What brought you to the martial arts? You've been doing it for yourself for around 3 decades now. Where did it
Yeah,
start?
so I started martial arts when I was I would say about 6, and I'm 34 now, so about 28 years or so of studying martial arts or teaching martial arts, being involved with martial arts to various different degrees. I started martial arts after we moved as a family to a new area. I grew up in a military family, so we moved around a lot. Eventually, we settled in the countryside of England, and I was kind of growing up in a small town at that time. Um, I wanted to do some sort of martial arts because it looked cool, it looked exciting, which I think is kind of the draw for a lot of kids, right? Little did I know that the martial arts club I joined would be so fundamental to my growth as a human being, and really helped me through 4 years of bullying, which I was about to go through, but had no idea I was going to go through it. There I was, kind of 6 years old, walking into the dojo for the first time, and I had no idea that starting from the following year, I would be bullied for 4 years. And so, it's amazing when you are part of a community how much support and strength you can get from that. And so that really was the reason I started, and then the impact was very, very visible for me very early on in that journey. My kind of journey with martial arts started with Taekwondo. I think Taekwondo is so good for young people. It gives them so much discipline and focus and attention to detail, and it provides them with a moral compass, which a lot of MMA type clubs don't necessarily instill like the old traditional styles. And so you've got the tenets of Taekwondo. There's a certain way in which a student behaves in a Taekwondo class, which is different to a boxing club or other classes. And so, I was really fascinated by that, and it certainly had an impact on my character. And so, what I found was very early on, I loved to compete, and I was competing around England. I think by the time I was 8 or 9 years old, I was an English champion. I was only a yellow belt at the time, or green tag at the time. And then by the time I was 16, I started cross training in various different styles. So I was doing kickboxing competitions, or I was training in boxing, or in Thai boxing. I remember I used to Google when I was about 14. I'd be researching life as a Thai boxer, and I'd always obsessed over what life was like living in Thailand, training 8 hours a day, and that was my dream. I really wanted to do that, and so I would try and mimic that lifestyle as a 14-year-old. It's quite funny because I'd go to school, I'd cook my own food at 14. My lunchbox was filled with broccoli and raw broccoli and grilled chicken, and I was living such a healthy life and training so hard from such a young age. And then eventually kind of moved away from Taekwondo, got into more full contact sports like Thai boxing and boxing, and eventually my journey took me to Thailand finally, where I've probably spent about a year and a half on Thai boxing clubs, training professional fighters, fighting professionally as well in the stadium there, and living and breathing Muay Thai, which is just such a beautiful art. And so I started with that traditional style of Taekwondo, moved into more freestyle boxing, Muay Thai, and then competing at a high level internationally. And then when I came back to England, that's when I started the Warrior Academy. So pretty much after I'd been fighting in Thailand for a long time, came back to the UK, launched a Thai boxing club, or took over a Thai boxing club, and the journey from there was the beginning of the Warrior Academy. And while I was doing that, from a martial arts point of view, it's kind of when I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. And so I studied Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for about 3 years, and I was training sort of 2 hours every single day, competing around the UK in the English Championships, no gi and gi, and in the British Championships and so on. And so I had this fascination for martial arts. For me, it was just about becoming the best I could possibly be as a martial artist, both stand up or ground fighting, whatever it was. But really, I think the most powerful thing about martial arts wasn't really the technical side, or the learning to defend myself, or the competitive side. It was the impact and the imprint that it left on my character, and how that's gone on to serve me, and therefore through me, so many other young people that I've worked with around the world.
I want to go back to that childhood of yours when you said, okay, when you stepped in into the dojo for the first time as a 6-year-old, little did you know that you would be bullied for 4 years, 1 year from now.
Yeah.
Why were you bullied, and what role did the dojo and the community there play? Can you tell us more about practicalities of that? What did it mean in that for that 7-year-old Sebastian?
Yeah, absolutely. So why was I bullied? I think the original reason, well, the main reason any of us get bullied ever, is because we don't yet own or love certain traits about ourselves. And so I really believe that we attract bullying into our lives. That's not something a parent wants to hear. But that's the reality, in my opinion.
It's a
Uh,
charged thing to say.
yeah, absolutely. And it's not something I used to stand up in workshops and tell groups of 50 parents that, and didn't necessarily go down well. But it came from a good place, because the reality was my whole focus with helping parents through the transition of bullying is around empowerment. If you love every trait about yourself that makes you unique, it's very difficult to bully someone like that. But if you are hyper insecure about a specific trait that you don't yet own or love about yourself, it becomes a target because you bring it to the forefront. It's something that triggers you immediately. And so it might be something that you're not even aware of, but it becomes very visible once you're in a social setting. So, for me, I think it was my height at the time. I was very small for my age, and so they picked on that. Then I started martial arts, and then they picked on me for doing martial arts. So you don't really expect that when you start martial arts, do you? You think
Yeah,
you're
like
tough.
why would you?
You think
Yeah.
you're tough. So yeah, come on, show us, sort of thing. But it started very much because I was a new kid in the class, right? So I had come from a public school in the UK, a state school, sorry, with about 40 kids in the class. In one year, we had 13 teachers come and go because the behavior was so bad. Students were expelled every month. It was carnage, and my academic performance had shot down. So my parents were like, well, we need to invest in his education because he's doing much worse than he should be for his age group. And so we found a private school, and there was about 10 to 12 kids in the class, mostly boys, and they came from very privileged backgrounds, and I came from the opposite at the time. It was like, I wasn't used to that at all. It was 40 kids in the class, yeah, a state school in Aldershot, and now I was in this kind of village private school with 10 kids whose parents went on fancy holidays and drove nice cars, and so I was immediately the kind of odd one out. And so it's the perfect storm, right? Where if you don't own or love certain traits about yourself, and then you're in a new environment where you are singled out for being different, it's kind of the perfect storm for bullying. And so then that's kind of where it started. It started with kind of name calling, psychological bullying, isolation, rejection. Then it turned more physical to the point where I was kind of held down and kicked and all this sort of stuff. And that was, the last kind of few years of that school for me before I moved to secondary school. And then the martial arts kind of filled me with more confidence. And this is where the relevance of the black belt community comes in, right? Because you look at martial arts, and it's all about empowerment. It's basically self-development, but in a community setting, which I think is really cool because it's very rare to find that as an extracurricular activity for any parent. Because most kind of individual sports, you don't necessarily feel a part of anything. You don't feel that community spirit. But when you send your child to a martial arts club, there is that community spirit from the second you get in. But ultimately, everyone's on their own journey. Everyone's working on their own thing. And so for me, it was the start of a long journey, but it was fundamental to my growth as an individual, but while feeling a part of a very supportive community, which is what you need, I think, when you are going through something like bullying.
Mm. Uh, Thanks for sharing the a bit of a contrarian opinion about the bullying, Sebastian. I really appreciate that because I agree with you that the self-confidence and if the self-love and acceptance is something that is so unattractive for people who want to get the charge and the energy by putting you down. So really working on ourselves is the way to fight bullying or to prevent it.
And this is kind of it, isn't it? It feels like a charged statement to say that we attract bullying into our own lives, right? But the reality is, if you kind of look at it, what actually is bullying, then it just becomes kind of common sense, right? Like if I was to say something horrible to you in English, you would take offense to it. But if I said it in Mandarin, I don't know if you speak Mandarin, but if I said it in Mandarin, you'd be like, I'm not really bothered by that, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like because you haven't processed it as a threat, it's therefore not triggering you, not upsetting you. In the same way that if you are really tall for your age and you are insecure about that, and someone then picks on you for being tall, you will feel like you're being bullied. Whereas if you feel empowered about that specific trait and you use that unique trait to become really good at basketball, and suddenly you're a brilliant basketball player, right? I'm sure, but I think basketball is quite popular in Ukraine, isn't it? You got
Yeah,
some,
we have quite good teams there. Yeah.
so maybe there's some Ukrainians, listening to this as well who would kind of understand that. But if you're empowered by something like that, then someone says you're tall and says it in a negative way, you wouldn't be insulted by that. You'd be like, yeah, I am, and therefore I am great at this.
Mm.
And so I think that if we approached bullying more like the universe providing you signals of what to love more about yourself, or giving you an indication of what you don't yet love about yourself and what you need to work on. Because ultimately, as human beings, we are dealt a set of cards, and those cards don't change. There are certain things you can't change about yourself. And until you are equipped with the self-love and the understanding and self-worth of those specific traits, you will attract bullying into your life for the rest of your life. And it's like a dark cloud that follows us. And not only that, right, when it comes to bullying, it's a dark cloud that follows you from a young age all the way up into adulthood, through adolescence, into the workplace, even into the relationships that you form and the partners you have, and then onto your kids. And this is where it gets pretty horrifying for me as a parent. It's like it's your duty as a human being before you have kids, I feel, to have the courage to stand up to those insecurities so you don't pass them on to your kids. Because the demons that we refuse to fight, we ask our kids to fight instead.
Yeah, amen to that. I once was asked by a friend who's younger than me, how do I manage to be this cool mom? And like what should she think about if she ever decides to have kids? Because when we met first, she was like, "I'll never ever. It's disgusting. It feels weird growing some creature inside me, and like, what am I supposed to do with that kid and whatever." But then she started observing me, and then she was like, "I could imagine having kids, yeah, but how can I do it?" Well, and I said, "Deal with your own shit.
Yeah,
That's
I love
that's the
that.
best recipe to be a good parent. So that, as
Yeah.
you said, to not pass it over to them and not deal them the bad cards that they have to start
Do,
going uphill from the very start."
do you know what, Anna? I've over the last year, I've interviewed 100 of the region's best psychologists, doctors, thought leaders, experts, specialists in various things like ADD, autism, behavioral psychology, communication, conscious parenting, all sorts. And what I noticed was, selfishly, I started it because I was like, I want to create content for the Warrior Academy. I want to create some amazing episodes for parents. Then after a while, I was just interviewing people I found interesting because I was loving it so much. I was learning so much as a parent, and I was watching myself change and my parenting change. And so what I realized was, if we really want to work with young people and make a transformation in their lives, we've got to actually start with ourselves as parents. And so many parents send their children to us in the Warrior Academy, and they do have, a lot of them, this concept of, we've heard you're really great. We know that you can develop confidence, conduct, concentration, develop their character. Here is my child. Please help them, fix them. And what we're now saying in the Warrior Academy is, thank you, we can do that, but you have to join us on this journey. If you want to maximize the results, like, you've got to be in the trenches with us. You can't outsource parenting, you know? And one of the hard things about, especially I think in the Middle East, where it's very typical to have nannies and support at home and so on, you can't outsource the tough bits. You can help, you can get help. And it takes a village to raise a warrior. Don't get me wrong. You can have amazing mentors, but ultimately you are your child's biggest role models. And so doing that inner work and having that introspective work done on yourself, and really looking back at the things that drive you as a parent and trying to fix the things that trigger you, and improving, the things that you need to work on, has a profound impact on kids. They really copy more of what we do than what we say. And I think it was interesting because I was on a podcast for traders. It was an investment podcast, and it's a really interesting one. And the I was being interviewed by someone who was asking advice for any traders who had kids as a parent. And I don't claim to be a parenting expert. I specialize in character development. I've worked with 45,000 kids around the world for the last 15 years, and I've got two kids and one on the way. But I'm still learning. I'm just applying things that I've learned. But I do have a decent base of knowledge, and so I can help people with that. And what I said was, I tried to put it in a way which an investor would understand. And what I said was, in those first 4 years of your child's life, for every unit of energy you put in, you get a 4 times ROI, right? Your return on investment is 4 times every unit you put in. From the age of 5 to 10, it's 2 times back. And then from 10 plus, it's 1 unit in, 1 unit back. And it's very, very difficult after 10 to really shape them because they're so influenced by the other people around them, the other environments they're a part of, their friends, their peers, online communities, whatever it is. But in those first 5 years, you've got the privilege of being able to really shape them. And that really comes down to shaping their morals, their values, and their character, in my opinion.
Also, I'm loving this, Sebastian, and it's a beautiful way of putting it. Not only for traders and investors, right? A lot of people in the business, especially like leaders who listen to my show, are thinking about the ROI a lot when they are hiring
Mm.
people, where they're investing in some tools or whatever it is, some support for their business, and thinking that way, like, okay, something can give me 4x, and
Yeah,
it's much harder than to get the same return on investment further down the line, because we're talking about different rates. Absolutely.
yeah.
So I really
It's and
appreciate
I mean
this.
it's one of those things as well. You know, when you're growing a business, especially in Dubai, there's a lot of pressure to get a nanny and support at home, and I would probably say 80% of our customers do. And just want to touch on that because it's one of the things that I find quite tricky about the Middle East is a lot of people they earn a lot of money and they then look for the cheapest possible help for their child.
Mm.
And so they'll earn a lot, but they'll outsource 50 hours of parenting a week to the cheapest nanny they can find. And really what they're doing is they're delaying so much stress in their life because, a very, very cheap nanny or au pair or whatever it is, or even educator or whoever's mentoring your child when you're not around, isn't going to have had the education or the background that you necessarily want to influence your child in the best possible way. They may be very caring, but that's going to be very different to what you may have want to pass on to your child in some way. And so I would like to see a shift to people really prioritizing that. I think that we can do a lot better when it comes to choosing the right people to influence our kids. Um, I know that a lot of parents have to work. Both parents need to work in order to cover living costs, just basic living costs. But there's got to be a kind of limit to how much you're willing to let go of as a parent if you want to be a great parent. I know one of the things we did is we never had a nanny. Instead, we had a driver. So we've got a driver, and the reality for me as an entrepreneur and a business owner is when I'm in that car, I'm working. So I'm on meetings, I'm on calls, and the reason I've got a driver is I spend 2 hours a day in the car or an hour and a half. When I come home, that's an hour and a half less I have to spend in this office, in my home office working. That's an extra hour and a half I get to work with my kids and to influence my kids. And so, for me, I think if you are an entrepreneur trying to balance parenting with entrepreneurship and building a business, it's those 10 years, those first 10 years, right? That's like it really struck me that those first 10 years are the most important that you've got as a parent. And if you've chosen to sign up to it, like people are in a rush to be a successful entrepreneur. But I'm like, entrepreneurship is a 50, 60 year game. And it's just ironic, isn't it? That it tends to be in the time of your entrepreneurship career where you're busiest, where you tend to have kids.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
you're in your 30s and you tend to have kids, but you also this is where your business needs you the most and all this sort of stuff. And I've made certain decisions, within my business, which probably has probably slowed us down, so that I can spend more time with kids. You've only got, I kind of say, you've only got 10 years to build sandcastles, so you might as well get stuck in because
Mm.
after that, they don't really want to build sandcastles with you. They want to do it with their friends.
Well, at some point they do again. Actually, I've seen it
Yeah,
in the
when
Mind
they've got their
Kicker.
own kids.
No, actually, like we have in the Mind Kicker, we had 50-year, 9-year-olds who would be playing gladly
Oh,
because
really?
we
Cool.
create the environment. Yeah, so it's definitely coming, but it's coming and going, and I really love how you're paying attention to that, Sebastian, and you're making intentional decisions how to build a business because you know your
Mm.
priorities and you walk your talk with that. It's not only about like, yeah, family is important for me, and then you go and start 10 new schools that will require in 10 new markets that require your attention, like
Yeah.
that you can't really delegate to your team. That is not walking your talk. But
Yeah.
being really mindful and intentional about that is how
We,
you
we
showed that it's
We stepped
possible?
back from a major deal this year. Um, we're talking multiple seven figures, which would have been a massive game changer for us. And I found out my wife was pregnant, and it was like I could this would have been an incredible deal of a lifetime, you know, for a martial arts instructor from the villages of Somerset or Wiltshire to be offered this opportunity would have just been completely one in a million. And I decided to turn it down because, and it was quite a difficult decision really. But the reality there was, I would be flying all over the world, primarily in the Middle East, but flying nonstop, a million meetings a week, and my wife would be having a child, and I probably wouldn't see them much. And this would go on for at least 3 or 4 years, and so I'd be trading those 3 or 4 years for that opportunity. And the way I kind of see it is, you look back in 10 years' time, and you I've met so many successful entrepreneurs who have exited their businesses for 8 million, eight figures, and so on 7 figures, and it's just like, if you really were going to look back and have some element of regret, it probably would be not spending that time with your kids rather than what you could have done with your business. You know what I mean? And everyone I've spoken to who's pushed themselves so hard on entrepreneurship while they were a parent, and they feel like they've missed out on those years, I've sensed that element of regret. And I think that's such a shame.
Here I'm curious. Your business is very impact driven, and you have the charity. I suppose whatever you do in the business and whatever success you get there is directly impacting in a positive way the charity or the foundation of yours. So there it becomes this dilemma. Okay, here I'm thinking selfish about my own happiness with just 3 kids of mine and my wife. It's 4 people plus me, 5. If I take this deal, I'll impact thousands, tens of thousands kids and set them up for a better life
Yeah.
and make them better leaders. How do you choose the selfish goal, selfish quote unquote here, over that impact?
I think it's about finding a balance, right? Like, there's two things here. The first thing is, there's a time for everything. It's not to say that I couldn't do that later on, but right now I'm building a family that needs me and relies on me. I'm the only dad they've got, right? Whereas a lot of these kids outside of the charity where we work with a lot of orphans, a lot of these kids, because this was for paying members, a lot of these kids, they do have families supporting them. So for me to give up my job as a father to basically go on some sort of commercial driven revenue mission would have been selfish and damaged my relationship with my kids, I feel. And it would have supported lots of kids, but the impact, if you measure impact based on, the complete transformation, what I could have done with my kids would be far greater than I could have done with several hundred or thousand. But then it's interesting because what we are doing with the charity is, it's growing much faster than any commercial enterprise I've ever been a part of. In 2 years, we've gone from 15 children in a homeless shelter in Nairobi to 4,000 every week in 6 or 7 different countries. We've just opened up in Uganda. I'm flying to India next week to live on the slums in Malbani for a week to train 600 kids. We're opening up there. We've just opened up in the favelas of Rio. And so this charity is now providing full-time employment to 15 to 20 instructors who are teaching every single week. And it's what's really cool for me as a parent is my focus has kind of switched from driving the business side and revenue and growing that to more focusing on impact. And if you look at all of my social stuff and the videos I make and the content I create, it's all around impact. And I really feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, they don't know when to stop. It's like we have this something within us where it's like, I need more. And it's like, actually, what you really love is creating, right? And so you love creating and you think, okay, I love creating, so I'm going to create more business, and a bigger business is better. And so you're kind of in this trap of enough is never enough, and you're never really happy. And I remember this story I was told once of I might have just seen it online. This guy has been working 20 years in his business. He's had a family, but he was away from the family the whole time when he was working. 20 years later, he finally gets to the point where the business is worth 25 million pounds, and he finally sells the business. And it's a massive dream. It's life-changing money for him. And this is the biggest accomplishment of his life. But in doing so, he sacrificed so many things in his life. So he's driven his family away. He doesn't have a wife anymore. So he's living alone in his apartment. And he sells this business. He goes home to his apartment. He orders a pizza. He cracks open a beer from the fridge and he sits on the sofa. And he's just like, what now? What do I do now? Because everything in his life was going towards that one moment. People don't think beyond that. They think that, that more and more and more is better and better and better. And so this one shift, which I had, when I visited that homeless shelter in Tika in Nairobi, was so many business owners can leverage the assets that their business is currently sitting on, whether it's some of their team's time or some of the IP, some of the resources, some of the technology, whatever it is. There are some things you can do. And I guarantee, and I've mentored over 600 entrepreneurs on this, I guarantee that if you just make with just a few small changes, you can triple the impact your business makes around the world, not just from a commercial sense, but you can triple the impact you make to individuals. And by doing that, you triple the fulfillment you'll experience. And I really feel, that if you just focus on money, you leave half the fulfillment your business can give you on the table. You're basically that guy with a beer and a pizza asking yourself, what next? When you could be saying, look at the incredible legacy I've expanded from that. And so for me, being impact driven was so important.
I see that. I work with some clients who have been those guys. And usually when they sit down with a beer and a pizza, they're like, what next? And then they set the next milestone. And they get into this rat race or in a hamster wheel where they before the finish line has been crossed, they already move it because they know that once they've crossed the line, there'll be nothing. They'll be just feeling empty. There's lack of fulfillment and so on. So they directly they see they're coming to this dream, to this goal, and they're like, okay, next one, and to keep running because they don't know that stopping behind the finish line or across it is just empty.
Do you know what I think, Anna? I think entrepreneurs are addicted to problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I really think is that we think the problem we're trying to solve subconsciously is the problem of money for ourselves. And so a lot of entrepreneurs I meet, once they've solved the problem of money for themselves and they feel financially secure, which has got the caveat of a lot of people never, ever feel financially secure, even if they've got tens of millions, right? It's quite funny. But if they actually do the introspective work and they realize I'm grateful for what I've got and I've got enough. So they're in this position where they feel like they're addicted to the growth of the business, but actually they're addicted to solving problems. And so when you look at your ability as an entrepreneur to solve problems beyond yourself and for mankind, I really think some of the biggest challenges that we face globally aren't going to be solved by governments or world leaders. They'll be solved by entrepreneurs. Because if you look at a government, it's bureaucratic, it's slow moving, it can't be that creative because the resources are stretched and so on. You look at an entrepreneur, they can come up with an idea, they can test it in the market, they can be very creative and they can move very quickly. And ultimately, they're very good at collecting support from people around them, i.e. selling an idea into the marketplace and then getting lift off very quickly. And so for me, I think some of the greatest challenges we face in the world today will be solved by entrepreneurs. And so it's kind of selfish as an entrepreneur to make loads of money and then think that is all you can do. If you've got the gift of entrepreneurship and you're great at solving problems, I think you should think bigger and think about what problems you can solve in the world.
Let's talk about the entrepreneurship and the business side a bit more, Sebastian. You have grown the Warrior Academy from some beginning 15 years ago. You were alone, and then you started growing the team, right? You opened multiple academies. First it was rural UK, and then you moved to Dubai, out of all places. I would like to talk about that transition as well, or the choice of the location. But first, about the leadership and the business side of it. I've heard you in some other interviews saying that okay, you needed to let go of control, you needed to trust your team to be able to grow, right? Not a single great thing is done in isolation or alone. But I want to go into practicalities of that. Can you give us examples of like when you were in those growth stages and you had to face this decision of okay, here I need to let go of control? How did it look like? What kind of decisions were those? What kind of phrases did you use? What kind of processes were those? I really want to get nuclear about what does it mean in practice for the leader to let go of control, because we hear it so much, but a lot of them don't understand what it means in their daily life.
Yeah, so I mean, my whole concept around entrepreneurship is that it's a team sport. I don't think that you can just do it on your own. I'm sure there are some business models out there, especially now with AI, where you can have a very small team, or you can do it on your own. But I think in general, you're far more successful when you've got people around you, and it's also less lonely. Um, when I look at entrepreneurship, it's a long road and it's hard. And I think you can get to where you want to go so much faster when you've got good people around you. But I feel like I've made every mistake when it comes to hiring the wrong people. I could do a whole podcast on mistakes of hiring
Mm-hmm.
because I think I've probably we've probably got over 100 or close to 100 people in the team now. And over 15 years of hiring people, I've made mistakes, and I think it's all well and good me saying you need to build a team, you need to do this, but it can be more damaging building the wrong team sometimes. You bring on the wrong person, and it can create a toxic culture overnight, and you're then trying to figure out what went wrong, and you don't know. And so it's something I'm so careful about now, bringing people on. We do so much due diligence. We have long probations. We're really careful. Several interviews, loads of references. We really take our time with it. But when I go back to those early days, um, I realized that I was the bottleneck in the business, and for me to grow, I had to take a risk. And I think a part of you as an entrepreneur is it's kind of like raising a child, right? Like when you raise a child, that those first stages are so you've got to be so careful because they're so fragile and they could just fall over, hurt themselves, and then it's a disaster. But as they grow up, your job is to make them more resilient. And so you need to get them ready for the world. You can't just keep them in their box and be defensive because otherwise competition comes around, you're done. You've got to let this thing grow. You've got to empower this thing to grow and grow and grow. And so from a business sense, you have to build a team to do that. A couple of things I would say there is you can expect, I think, when you outsource initially, the the person who takes over from you won't be as good as you. And so you can probably expect a 10 to 20% drop in effectiveness of whatever that role is because you're the entrepreneur, you're the owner of the business. It's so much in your interest to make that task great, and to really, have the work ethic around it and everything. But I think if you've got the idea of, it might not be perfect, but I'm going to, really train them and work with them to try and get them there. But ultimately, when I step back from this, it's going to allow me to work on other things, other high value tasks in the business, which will improve the business in so many other ways. And so I think that's a really important thing to take note of. And then you get to the adolescent stage where, like I said, 10 years plus as a child, the business starts to find its own feet. And this is the stage where, I guess I found myself in the last few years, where if I was to be, the more involved I am, sometimes I could slow down the business. Like if I'm involved with operations now, like I've got a leadership team, they'll just be like, "What are you doing? Go back in your office and come up with some ideas. We're running out of ideas. Come up with new ideas. Go and have a coffee and come up with something fresh." Rather than being in there and being like, what has this person done that? Have you done this? And micromanaging. You've got to find the right people through a really good interview process, do your due diligence, and then trust them. And at the end of the day, if you aren't able to do that, your business won't grow. And it's very, very simple. Either you learn to let go, just like letting your, 15-year-old kid go and bike to the park on their own. If you don't learn to let go, they won't grow. And so it's really important for me now to understand my place in the business. What is that? And just like having a kid, as they start to be more influenced by the other people around them who are kind of leading them, leadership team, other staff, whatever it is, or their friends in school. I'm doing two examples at once here. Your job is actually to be there almost like a mentor. So you go from the caregiver and protector to the mentor. You're the founder, you know the values, you know the vision, you know the mission, you were there from the start. Sometimes that business is going to go through rocky times. And when a business goes through rocky times or a child goes through difficult transitions, they go back to the founder, parent, and they need guidance. And your job is to steer the ship back on course with the same morals, the same values, and the same intention from the beginning. And that's kind of the stage I'm at now. And so, it's like jumping in when things are tricky, being that calm in the storm, and constantly innovating, and then having a team around you to implement. Like the actual implementation of the business, I do very little of, but I'm constantly here having conversations with amazing people like you and other people that I interview and working on the philosophy and theories and strategy of the business to really grow and evolve it. And so that when I can influence the business, it's done in the most effective way possible. So I guess that's kind of top level thinking of how I look at the entrepreneur's journey when it comes to outsourcing and growing a team.
I love it, and I can so relate to that different stages and the parenting. And I usually say that as well. That when I started my business, I actually became a mom of two. So I had a 1-year-old at home, the human being, and then I had a newborn business, and it was the same. And it helps me a lot
A
to have
newborn
this
business and a
perspective.
newborn baby, yeah.
Yeah, she was not a newborn anymore, but as I said, 1 year old, and in a new country where neither me or my husband or there was not a home country, it was new for both of us, so it was challenging enough. And then I decided to go on my own and start a business.
Yeah.
Sometimes we make those weird decisions in our life to not make it easy for ourselves. But
Actually,
I
just to jump in on that, I think
yeah,
I think that having kids is one of the best things you can do as an entrepreneur. I think it's
tell
like
me more.
jet fuel. I think people say to me, "Oh, I don't want to have kids yet because I'm trying to build my business." Have the kids. Watch your business triple. Like I had kids and my business just went through the roof because I was like, "Oh my God, I need to actually make this work now." And for so many years, I was using the business to fund an extreme sports lifestyle where I was base jumping around the world and skydiving and climbing mountains and then when I had kids, I was like, well, I can't just carry on doing that. I've now got to build something that supports them and that they're proud of. And you kind of have this legacy mentality. And so I think, for me, it really aligns your thinking to a much longer term view. And so, it's, pardon me, it sounds like you experienced that too, right? When you had kids, it kind of was like, bang, I need to focus, you know?
It's actually both and. I totally agree with you, Sebastian, about that. The long term. I liked how one of the career coaches I hired when I was deciding whether I should find a job here in a new country or go in my own business. So I wanted
Yeah.
someone to think at. And she was like, when you get a kid, your system of coordinates shifts. And I really like that. It can be still the same graph that you're drawing with your life, but you're looking at it from a different perspective. And I really like that visual of it. So it did that to me. But also, I feel like I'm still sometimes getting in a rush, Sebastian, with getting that legacy, like showing her when she's so young, when she's still like so spongy from me, when I have so much influence for her, to show her the results of my work, because she now sees the
Yeah.
hard work, she sees the passion, but not necessarily the work or the results of it. Like we have a good lifestyle, we're good financially, but it's still something that I feel like I'm in a rush to show her,
Why,
and that
why,
sometimes
why
makes
are
it
you,
difficult.
why do you feel the rush?
It's a good question.
How old is she?
She's 5.5.
Most of your memories tend to start from 4. When you think back, right, to your childhood, hard to remember earlier than 3, isn't it?
Well, to actually interesting enough, for my childhood, I have very few memories until teenage.
Really?
Very
Okay.
few.
So
Yeah,
so I would say for most kids it starts at like 4.
yeah.
And if you were to complete your entrepreneurship work now, I think she would miss out on the whole building phase. It's almost like looking at a trailer at the end. It's like ta-da, there it is. And then she wouldn't understand the pain and the growth and the sacrifice and the work ethic that went into building it. So I would say actually, if you really wanted to impact her life in the best possible way, you would string out that journey for another 10 years.
That's such a beautiful and powerful mind shift, Sebastian. Thank you so much for it. I'll take it in. I'll stop rushing.
I think we're all at fault for rushing. Do you know what I mean? People look at entrepreneurship like I need to complete it. I need to complete it, right? And I'm like, well, what if you looked at entrepreneurship like a 60-year game?
And I
And
do,
really, you were
but
just trying to
still,
build the skills. But a lot of people, you might be, but a lot of people don't see it that way, right? Like,
yeah.
they're like, they're just like Gary Vee says, macro patience, micro speed.
Hmm.
It's like they say they are like, yeah, I've got a long-term view. And it's like, okay, tell me your 20-year plan. They don't
Hmm.
even have a 1-year plan. They're like, they got a 3-month goal. They'd love to be here. They'd love to be there. And it's, for me, it's just like, do you really love the game of entrepreneurship?
Hmm.
Because if you did, it would be so less stressful for you. If you the longer you draw out that line, the less stressful the whole experience is. Like if you invest in the S&P 500 and you're like, oh my God, it's going great, it's going bad today, it's going great today. There's all this feast and famine going on. But if you zoom out and you're like, cool, I'm going to invest in it for the next 50 years. What if you looked at the game of entrepreneurship a bit like investing in the S&P 500?
Hmm.
And we were just like, I'm going to invest in myself. And that's my main priority because over time, I know it's going to pay off and we're going to do this, right?
Hmm.
I'm going to make this great big impact down the line. And so, I think if you truly love the game of entrepreneurship, you understand that there's ups and downs and it's like a journey and it's an adventure and it's something exciting you're going on. And ultimately, at the end of it, you might impact loads of people's lives beyond your own,
Hmm.
and I think it's a really important thing to look at because it's stressful. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's so tough, entrepreneurship.
Hell
And I
yeah.
think what made it easier for me is A, surrounding myself with the right people, B, sorry, A2, shall I say, hiring the right people. So surrounding my business with the right people. And then B, having a long-term view and just falling in love with the game long term, not just saying it, but actually being okay with things going up and down.
Hmm. Speaking of the right people, well, let's go back to this that you said that you had a lot of mistakes with hiring and not firing people, Sebastian. I would like to ask you about the toughest mistake, the one that hurt the most for you when it comes to people on your team.
Where do I start? Let me choose one. This is a very competitive place, Dubai. We've had all sorts of characters try to dethrone us. But the problem with being at the top of the game, which we are, is there's very little when it comes to people on the same level as us in the UAE. Most clubs have about 300 or 400 students. We've got over 1,500 in this country alone. And so when you look at it like that, our team meetings are like 40, 50 staff in one room discussing, the challenges that a business might have. And so, we're much bigger, we're more professional and so on than a lot of organizations. And so you're in the crosshairs. Everyone's out to get you. And so from a competition point of view, we've got all sorts of attacks coming in. Some illegal attacks like fake reviews and um, people bad mouthing us online, to people outwardly trying to steal our data. We've had customers try to approach our instructors to try and steal our instructors, give them business plans to then say they'll start their own thing. We've had landlords start up competing businesses next door to our current place and trying to steal our IP. We've had um, instructors join the Warrior Academy and then leave with more instructors to then try and steal lots of customers who then will go with them and then come back a couple of months later when they realize it's very, very different. Um, to instructors who have come in and caused toxicity in the culture. We had one particular person, I won't ever mention any names, but we had one person, and I really blame myself for this. They were a chronic narcissist, and they came into the business, and if I just done more research and had more references, I would have picked up on it, and I didn't. And that was on me as the business owner. If I had phoned up their previous three employers, they probably would have hinted towards the fact that I was going to experience an absolute disaster. And we did. And as a result of that, we had two other of our best staff leave because of how difficult this individual was. And from that, then we had all sorts of other issues. So, it's difficult for me to choose one. But as you can see, we are pretty battle hardened here. I think being in the Middle East and running a business across two continents, which I had to drag through COVID as well, has really given me thick skin because at the end of the day, if I've got lots of family now and friends who are starting their own businesses, and when you get that first sense of competition, it's kind of a bit unnerving, right? It's like, oh God, and it feels so emotional and personal, a bit like bullying, because this is your child. And I'm now able to sit down and mentor them through that. It's like I've got a PhD in competition now from being in this country because of the amount of attacks we've had. So many immoral attacks where it's not about competing, it's about cheating. And that's something it's really sad for me to see within the martial arts community, but I have done, unfortunately. But even though these individuals, choose to publicly badmouth us, we've never done it back. We're completely private, and we try and maintain our composure and conduct. And I think that speaks volumes to our customers and who we are, and as we show up. And I think, when I said earlier about being a founder and guiding the business with the right morals, with the right values, that's my job. But certainly looking back,
Walking your
you
talk.
know, walking the talk, yeah. But looking back, I think, that when the mention I had there of, hiring that one wrong individual, which then caused other people to not like working there and leave, really struck me as a huge mistake that I made.
So now you mentioned that you have very solid process for hiring. You have a long probation period. Can you tell us about the hiring process? How do you make sure that you don't make the same hiring mistakes like then?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing we do is we advertise all year round. So we don't just advertise when we need it. So, if you actually look at recruitment, when your business gets bigger and bigger, actually, recruitment is a sort of marketing as well. And so you need to market the position to attract the most talented people. And so this becomes another really important thing when it comes to aligning your business with impact. And so, when people join us, they help to grow the commercial side of the business, which in turn means we can grow the charity side, right? So they are making a direct contribution through their work to the charity, which helps thousands of underprivileged children. So we exist for a reason beyond making money initially. And what I've noticed is by doing that, you attract talented people. And so you may be in a position where you can't afford to pay someone more, then they could get a job somewhere else earning slightly more or the same. But if you have something if you have a business which has got an incredible culture, an amazing vision, and is out there to do good in the world, people will join you. You'll attract talented people. And so that's the first thing I'd say. Exist for a reason beyond making money, and you'll attract more talented people. The next thing I'd say is advertise all year round. You don't want to hire in a panic ever. I've done it. It's a mistake. You hired the wrong person because you're like, yeah, they seem great in an interview. Let's get them in. Start on Monday, bang. Oh, thank God that's over. Now I can crack on with growing the business again.
And
Doesn't
that's
work.
where the hell starts.
It might work now and again, but I would probably say 1 in 3 times you're making a mistake. It's a lot easier to remove someone from the business before they start, right? Once they're in the business, it's like now it's actually a massive legal matter to remove someone, even if they're doing something wrong or they're not performing. The next thing I would say is have very, very clear expectations from the start, and have a long probation period where you do manage their targets and you make it very clear, month one, this is what we expect. Month two, this is what we expect. Month three, we weren't impressed with this or that, and have very, very clear communication. Because a lot of the issues happen when you're not clear with your communication, right? And it's like, if you just told them exactly what you wanted, they probably would have been able to do it. But now you're in the position where it's too late. You've got resentment towards them for not being a top performer. They've got resentment towards you for suddenly putting loads of pressure on. So having clear communication is vital.
I'll pause here for two questions, Sebastian. First of all, what is
Yeah,
a long period, probation period in your
6 months.
eyes? 6 months.
Whatever the legal requirement is in the country, we can do maximum 6 months here. So that's what we do, which means that within those 6 months period, they can leave within a month, and we can terminate the contract within a month.
Mm-hmm. Great. And the second question was about what if you as a leader are hiring someone because you have no idea about that expertise or that area of your business, and that's why you're hiring them. So how do you set the targets there? How do you follow them up without being the stick in the wheel, but at the same time providing the clear guidance, as you said, that is so important?
I think this is where having a business mentor comes in. If you aren't sure about a specific industry or field, having someone who's been there and done it, who has hired those sorts of people before to advise you is really good. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, but you do need to pay for the advice, right? Like you're paying for it somehow, either through your ignorance or through mentoring and advice. Up to you. I certainly think it's a lot less stressful to pay a few £1,000s for a few hours of someone's work than to try and terminate someone for ruining your business 6 months later. So that's one way of looking at it. The other thing I would say is you don't just, let's say you want to hire someone to take over your Facebook ads. You haven't got a clue about Facebook ads. So you should interview 5 agencies. Don't just choose one because your mate said they're good down the pub. Interview 5 different agencies and ask them, look, here's access to my account. What do you think? What can you do with it? What are the expectations? And then once you found the top 3 that you like the sound of, speak to their customers. Like it really helps to do the homework. A lot of people don't do the homework with this sort of stuff. They don't get the references. They might get the references from an employee, but then if they're outsourcing to a contractor, they don't. But I think you should. So that's what I would say. Getting a mentor, doing the references, and then having a way to test it. If you can test something new, always find a way to test things in a cheap way, whether it's a trial period or a limited amount of time or whatever it is. Test. Always test, because you can rule out so many non-performers just by testing first up.
And not only non-performers, I would say it's also about the attitude. And you talked about that. Like when the person is toxic and they're ruining the culture, which is so hard to create, but so easy to ruin. That is something that you only see in action. People can be so good performing as like acting during the interview process, but then once they need to roll up the sleeves and get their hands dirty, you see the
so
attitude.
True.
And that can be so destructive if you have not captured it on time. So I love that.
And culture is this fragile thing, isn't it? Like, what is culture? Like, if you had to boil culture down as one statement, I would say culture is how the business makes you feel. That's it. That's culture, isn't it? And so how does your business make people feel when they work there, when they visit it, when they pick up the phone? Do they feel valued? Do they feel respected? Do they feel like you're investing in them? It was interesting because when I had this toxic individual joining us, we then went through this stage of, right, no one's happy because of this person. And we didn't realize it was this person at the time, but they were one of the instigators of the unhappiness, obviously. So we started coming up with all these exciting perks, and it was like, we're going to fill this job with so many perks. And then when we had our new operations manager join, he was like, right, we're going to ditch all those perks, and we're just going to look at this like, right, we need to remove all these people who are not the right people and move forward with the right ones. And then we did, and the culture didn't have all those ridiculous perks, but it just had this amazing vibe and feeling and culture where people felt appreciated without you having to spoil them with some weird perk. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, and those things are superficial and they might be fun in the first 3 months, but then they just become whatever. But
exactly that.
I loved how you define the culture. That's how people like what people feel about the business and
how does the business make you feel? Yeah.
Yeah. And that just speaks volumes about what we need to build as leaders.
Definitely.
So Sebastian, I'm mindful of the time, but I really want to understand a bit about the charity. So how is the Warrior Academy connected to the Bates Foundation, and what are you doing there? What are the ambitions? And let me know about those things.
Yeah, sure. So the Bates Foundation started 2 years ago with the goal of sponsoring 10,000 underprivileged children per week across every continent. And that was a mammoth concept. I mean, the original idea of that came, 10 plus years ago in the UK. When I wrote it down on a piece of paper, we only had 500 students at the time. We were struggling to manage them. And it was just like, how are we ever going to do this? So it did sound like a ridiculous number. Um, but we stuck at it, right? 10,000 students. Then we grew the business to having 2,000 members. And we were like, well, we want to scale this feeling that we were using with our local scholarships in the UK, because 10% of our members in the UK were getting free tuition. These were students who were referred to us from welfare officers or going through very difficult transitions, or there were siblings of children who were terminally ill at children's hospices. So they had to go through the transition of losing their sibling or so many other things like that. And so we gave free tuition to them. And we had incredible success, and it really impacted the team. But as we grew to Dubai, we wanted to scale that feeling of making an impact globally. And so this concept of being in every continent came about. And I visited Nairobi, and I call this the point of no return for me, because I went to a rescue center, and there was about 30 boys who'd been rescued off the streets and the railways of the surrounding areas of Nairobi. And they were malnourished. They were covered in burns and scratches and scars, and many of them were addicted to substances, glue, alcohol, and so on. A lot of them are 9 years old, so we're talking seriously young. But they were abandoned, and there I was with this concept of, I'm going to create a martial arts club in this rescue center. And I remember sitting on a wooden chair, just thinking, this is ridiculous. How can I, as a martial arts instructor, help these kids? It's such a big systemic issue that they've got. How can I make an impact? And I gave one of the students who was doing really well in the class a uniform. His name was Jeremy, and his face lit up. And I suddenly realized that in that moment, what I was experiencing was imposter syndrome, because of course I could help improve their lives. Even in that moment, giving a uniform, I had improved his life, to a degree. And it was like his face lit up because that was actually his first ever brand new set of clothes in his life. He only ever got one other set of clothes, which are all torn. And so when he put it on, he felt like a martial artist. He was becoming a martial artist, and kids have incredible imaginations. And in that moment, I kind of realized to myself, over the last, at that time, 13 years, I'd worked with tens of thousands of kids developing their character. I'd helped kids through massive transitions like chronic bullying, depression, even suicide, ultimately saving kids' lives in some cases. And I realized that the only thing that would help someone like Jeremy and these other boys out of the position they're in is a change in the course of direction of their life based on the decisions they make. And ultimately, if you want to change the direction and the decisions of someone's life, you have to develop their character. It's our character that influences our decisions. It literally influences every decision we make, from the friends we make, the relationships we seek, the passions we pursue, the jobs we take, the businesses we start. Everything comes down to character. And so what I realized is that when Jeremy gets his one shot after 6 months of being in the homeless shelter to transition to full-time education, 90% of these boys, they run away from it because they've been beaten up by teachers or police or on the street before. So they reject all authority. But if I can empower them through our character development program, run that martial arts club, the Warrior Academy Club, in that Thika homeless shelter, and then have another club in the school, so they transition into an assistant leadership role for the instructor there, suddenly they've got this sense of belonging. So they actually make the decision based on their character to stick around longer. And so now we've successfully transitioned dozens of these groups of boys through the rescue center into schools, and they've stuck at it because they know that they are sticking with something longer term. They're on that black belt journey for 6 to 8 years. And so that was kind of the point of no return for me, where I had that realization that I needed to get over myself and stop having this imposter syndrome that you can't use martial arts to change lives, because that's ultimately what we've been doing for 15 years. But also the sharp contrast to raising my own kids in an entitled upbringing in Dubai, where I'm now in this situation looking at other kids around the world who have got nothing. And it was so unfair to see. It was such a horrible, unfair, unjust contrast that I basically thought in my head, how can I not do this? And so I hired my dad as the CEO of the charity. So he came on board, a commando, para, 40 years in the army. He left the army to run one of the army charities. So I brought him on board, and now I was road tripping across Africa in an old Toyota with him, going from homeless shelter to orphanage to rural primary school, and we taught several thousand kids. And now he manages the charity, and he's been expanding it, around the whole world in these 7 different countries and 3 continents. So that's what we're up to. In terms of getting involved with that charity and making this huge impact, I've created the Patreon program. So for the first 2 years, I basically was so obsessed with growing the charity. I didn't even think about fundraising. I was just like, I'm just going to pay for it myself. To the point where I was putting like $100,000 a year into the charity. And that's not necessarily sustainable. You get to a point where, as the business grows, we were going to move a certain percentage of money across and cover the cost of the charity. But if you want the charity to really soar, then the business is the bottleneck. Just like I spoke about earlier, me being a bottleneck in business, the business finances were a bottleneck in the charity. So I needed a fundraise. But I didn't like a few things about how charities typically fundraise. They spend loads on marketing, loads on getting a CMO involved and all this sort of stuff. And so my view was, what if I could grow the fundraising of the charity without spending a penny on marketing? And so in the last 8 weeks, I've raised almost $700,000 by doing exactly that through the Patreon program. 8 weeks ago, I went on a skiing trip with 40 other entrepreneurs. I stood up, gave a talk about the charity, much like I've just done now, talking about that club in Tika. And we did an auction. And, I had Dan Priestley, a mentor of mine, and many others in the group, donated $30,000 that day. So a 5-minute talk, 1 minute auction, we raised $30,000. And I was like, this is incredible. So following that, understanding entrepreneurs and how they've got this desire to make an impact, but also a lot of these guys and girls, they wanted to explore the world and have to balance kind of adventure and seeing more of the world and networking and being a part of this community. And so what I did is I've created what I think is the perfect 3 years for entrepreneurs, which is this balance of impact and adventure. And so it's a 3-year commitment on the Patreon program. There are 4 tiers: bronze tier, which is £2,000 a year; silver tier, which is £5,000 a year; gold tier, which is £10,000 a year; and the platinum tier, which is £20,000 a year. But they're all limited. So I think we've only got 2 spaces left of the gold, 3 or 4 left of the silver, and about 10 left of the bronze. The platinum's already gone. And so we've got this group of incredible entrepreneurs who every year I take to Africa or India or Asia to visit these scholarship tours. I then take them on a separate adventure to really test their character. And then we do a VIP dinner in Dubai or London or in Switzerland each year. And so it kind of gives them the opportunity to meet other entrepreneurs who are impact driven like them, gives them the chance to learn about how they can do the same thing with their own charity, but also means that they are going to be helping us grow to 10,000 sponsored underprivileged children every single week around the world within those 3 years, without us as a charity having to spend anything on marketing. And so what I love about that is we're a very, very lean charity. There's just no cost involved. The money we get goes directly to the instructors. We don't even pay the orphanages because so many orphanages are corrupt. Not the ones we work with, but so many that we interview. And so, talk about due diligence and doing references and stuff like this, you would be shocked to find out. So we find the right instructors and we pay them directly after a month of teaching. And so we've, a lot of charities, I just think waste money. And so we've managed to completely rule that out with our charity, which I'm proud of, because a lot of people, they wouldn't have thought that way. But if you come from an entrepreneurial background and then you start a charity, actually there's so much carryover. All those skills you've honed over 15 years, whatever, it's like, you can use all that to build a charity and help thousands of people. So that's the Patreon program. If you go to the Bates Foundation, www.thebatesfoundation.com, you can see that there, or just find me on LinkedIn, Sebastian Bates on LinkedIn. I talk about it all the time. or you can find me on Instagram, seb.bates, and I obviously make lots of content around our work with the charity there as well. So if you are an impact-driven entrepreneur, or you want to get into philanthropy, you want to have more fulfillment from your business, that's basically what I speak about.
I love it. And now, as always, Genius Leaders, I'll put the links to that Sebastian just mentioned to the show notes, so it's easy for you to reach out. And that's what I did. I heard about Sebastian from Daniel Priestley, his mentor, on the Dearest CEO, and that sounded absolutely fantastic and resonated. So I started following him on LinkedIn, and I reached out, and here we are having this conversation. So you always want to ask away. That's also what Daniel is talking about, right? Someone in the world has the resources, woken up with those resources that you need today. So you just need to ask around. And I think that your journey is about that. You have been really true to your values and to what you want to build. You're very intentional with the choices you make, with that long-term vision in focus, and you're asking, you're building the right teams, you're building the right support systems around you, so that you can reach that ambitious goal, which is beautiful and so heartwarming, what you're doing. So Sebastian, thank you so much for what you do, and thank you so much for sharing so many golden nuggets. I'll need to listen to this again and again myself, and I'm looking forward to do that, because you've gone deep. In a very short time, you've gone really deep on a lot of topics, and you've done it so beautifully and skillfully, and this is something I really appreciate from you as a guest.
Thank you so much, Anna. I appreciate that.
And Genius Leaders, to you, as always, I want to remind you that I see you, I feel you, I love you, and I do believe that you can find your purpose as well and build that legacy in a way that is sustainable, in a way that is nurturing you, is not compromising your life or your dear ones, so that you have the dear ones around you to celebrate that big milestone once you achieve it. Take care of yourself and keep walking towards that goal. Love you. Talk to you next week.